Okay, well, we're going to start by getting curious about opening the lungs and, it's kind of saturating our ventral focus into our practice. It's a nice kind of sanctuary of um, content that you can move through that is possibly create some harmony. So that's what I like about yoga. I kind of fall into it for sanity often. So it's beyond kind of physicality. But when you are sitting in front of this bolster right in the front, and if during the session you have trouble hearing me, I have people's videos on, so you can always give me some information that way. I'll keep my eyes over to the screen. But when you walk your feet in towards your hips, that means the feet are wide. So I'm going to encourage you, as you start to lean back onto that kind of lengthening of your rib cage, you're going to take a block flat and lift up the hips, slide the block under the back of your pelvis. And then as you guide your head back to your blankets, noticing if this height of blankets is enough or if it's too much. I find that lately, for some reason, just this chest opening is very useful. Obviously, it's a positive thing to do, is to open up heart, chest, lungs. So if you have one blanket under your head instead of two, it's okay. You don't have to have this much height. You might notice some days that it's just too bulky for this pose. So if you want to take one out, take one out. And then as you move your sand over and onto your ribs, select that weight so that it is at the approach state of where you really feel these bones versus the softer part of your core. So kind of find where the sand can go fairly high up where the ribs intersect and right below your sternum. So it's not going to be all the way up onto your chest bones, right? It's just below where things can move with the breath. Where you move your breathing, your sand moves too. Got it. Send your legs so they either straighten down or they step a little wider with the knees bent. That's completely fine. You could have the feet wider, the toes in, the knees together, or you could have the legs straight on down. If you have a couple sandbags, you're going to add another one to the top of your thighs. And those that have that belt behind you, grab onto your belt and then stretching your upper range of motion. When you select the grasp of the belt, can you clasp onto it and give a sense of pull? So you're pulling a little bit out and lighting up the awareness in your rib cage. So make it so that's a borderline strength physique, right? Sensation. And then after a few moments, you can let your heels kind of rock and relax your feet and send your hands a little wider. This is where I get a little bit into decision making about my blankets right at this point, where the belt is held and I'm still using the blanket to kind of hold my elbows on the floor, or your arms could be set up on the blankets. You choose. Eyes closing. And once they feel that sensation of being internalized, emphasize the motion of your breath so that the ribs feel directionally like they're lifting with the inhale. And with the exhalation, you can feel that natural ascension of the diaphragm, but descent of the abdomen. So simply the study of the movement of your breathing muscle is as you inhale, the diaphragm descends, and as you exhale, it actually ascends. But your belly expands on the inhale and releases down towards the spine on the exhale. So with a few more moments, I want you to get a little more comfortable with your legs. So if you happen to feel that the legs are too close together, that will likely create some rigidity in your back. So if that's still a hardship in your spine, then bend your knees and feel the soles of the feet turning the toes in and the knees rest together. So the clue here is relying on the motionary qualities of your breath to bring you into balance and awareness for this practice, which is just beginning. It's a sliver of time in the wholeness of our day. So if you can bring the focus to anchor on your breath, it is a helpful guide versus other things you can have on in the background. Now let's all meet where the knees are bending. So we all have our feet walking in, and get a feel when the knees separate that you have this awareness with the arms as a unit. It's like they're a unit when there's a belt between them. Kind of combines the two sides, doesn't it? So take that belt, hold the belt, and as you bring the arms and the belt over your chest towards the ceiling, instead of correcting the width, just feel what you have right there, asserting your arms, pulling the belt, and then reaching back one time. Okay. Now when you bring your belt up towards the ceiling, my elbows are slightly bent. I'm going to place the belt across my chest to move my sandbag aside. And then as you move the sand off, take a hold of your belt again and bring your right knee towards your chest. Okay, so place the experience of your left foot so it's an anchor, and you want to feel that kind of as a bolt down into the ground. And as you lower that right knee, you're going to switch sides. And I want you to kind of pedal this one a little bit. I know pedaling might not be the first wording you can have. We all have different ways to express our experience, but you're going to alternate drawing the knees one at a time. That's important towards the belt. But at some point, I want you to start moving your belt with the experience. So when I bring my belt overhead, right, I want to take it, I'll get it together here. So my knee goes towards the belt, and as my foot goes down, my belt goes overhead. Okay, coordination. So alternating knee towards belt doesn't mean knee to chest. So keep it friendly on your hip flexors, the front of your thighs, right where it connects at the top of the pelvis. Alternate the knee to the belt and feel if you want to widen your hold on your belt, that's completely fine, or narrow it. And internalize, that means eyes can close. The sensation in your back muscles in that kind of spool of movement, also in the core, the front strengthening. So we'll seem to do this a gazillion times. And then after the next time you lift up your knee and draw your belt towards it, let's take our knees back down and out, feet together in what's called cobbler's pose, feet together, knees out, belt being held overhead. So you can selectively feel from the legs putting their energy in towards the center to stimulate the core strength. Now we're elongating the midsection. So taking a moment here where the arms now can relax away from holding your belt and then separate the arms so that you can feel them relaxed besides you, open. So as the elbows kind of creep farther out, distant from your chest, consider the practice as a high architecture, right, for your bones. So I am trying to evenly adjust, getting my arms wide, okay? And also feeling my knees motion out. If it's a little tough on your thigh strength and flexibility, you can scoot your feet farther forward with the feet still close together, knees out. It will feel different, in some ways a little more intense, in some ways less. So feel both those layers, feet as close as you can get them, or feet a little farther forward. And either one that you want to choose for the next 10 seconds is perfect. But feeling the value of this whole front body lengthening. Okay, and then as we stretch our feet forward so they're straight on the floor, you want to kind of feel like your heels are digging into the ground, and you're going to push forward into your heels, feet as close together as they can make do. Open the chest, right? You're kind of in this shape of a cross here. A little bit hopeful, heartful. And then noticing how your back arch is plenty. And as we slide the feet in, they're pretty much in a proper hips distancing. I want you to start to roll to your left and spend little time assessing where your block needs to be now that was under you. You're going to actually try to make that roll to your left so that the body has nice coordination skills. And then you're actually going to come back up onto the block. This is an interesting coordination exercise. So you're not getting rid of your block yet. Go to the right. If you got props that are kind of in your way, just carefully move them aside. So you're feeling like this is a side sage kind of channel of movement. And let the left arm stretch over. And then as you move back, this is when you're going to push your feet down, lift your hips a tiny bit to slide the block away. And roll now to your left elbow. So you can kind of feel that pressing down. And then slide your elbow to the center of the bolster and the blankets. And then set up shop for side sage. This is where the ball comes in handy. I forgot. This is the pose. So if you have a ball, place it on the inside of the right leg. Or if you have a block, your blocks will have two homes right now. Inside the right leg and over on the other side of the blankets. Okay. So take up the shaping here of the left knee bending and the side bar or the side beam of the waist and the thigh tissue. So this whole tundra of, it's a magnet for holding on, this whole midsectional area, heart, lungs. So we're going to take our sand and put it onto your ribs today. If you are not in agreement with that idea, don't use sand, or you want to have a sandbag on your hip, and that's where you need the support right now. Add it where it's needed. And then as you add your ingredients, okay, into the bowl of the pose, right, to figure it out, we're going to reach through that right arm and lengthen your side and feel where the hand overhead finds a destination, which could be on a block, and it might instead be on your side or kind of flailing open for an undetermined amount of time. Okay, so as I mentioned in the beginning, we're still kind of in that first 15 to 20 minute phase where we're getting curious about our breathing, reducing the tightness in the ribs, and creating internal space. So use the props so that they can offer you the most support, right? And experience the exhalation lengthening. Receiving your breath through the nose, belly relaxes, ribs expand. And on the exhalation, let the core body simply center. Maybe really relax the expectation of how the exhalation should part and how long it is. Just enjoy the practice of receiving wellness. That might be moving that upper arm because it could feel like you stretch it in the initial stage and then it kind of locks a bit, right? It kind of tensing fascia. There's such a thing. So if it is starting to seize up around one location, which is a joint usually, I would recommend let that upper arm maybe get a little more passive, resting to your blanket, or even better, resting on your side. Because that shoulder got enough kind of juicing and hydration. So now you can let it center and kind of soak it up by still keeping that side body open. So give it a few more cycles of in and out breath. Yeah, that's the key today, just that cycle of breath to come back to your center. You know, whatever the news feed is for you right now, see if you can stay with the practice, at least as much as possible. And if your neck is holding, let your weight of your head rest into your blanket or towels. That might mean that you feel like you're turning your head down into the towels or blanket. Okay. Now with a few more moments here, we're going to work a bit with this right thigh, since that's the closest one to your right arm. But also the left side hopefully is now kind of surrendered into the props. The weight on the body is really ultra helpful for that. But you know, when you take off the sand and we do a little bit of guidance for this quadricep, we're all at a different capacity for a knee joint, right? So I'm not asking that you hold your foot and you reach your foot way behind you, which would be maybe not a possibility in this position. So what you might do is try to stretch the right leg a little farther back without the block or ball necessarily holding it to one shape. So you try to free up this whole wheelhouse of the hip flexor, which connects obviously into these quadriceps, which is a hip flexor itself, the quadricep. So we're going to turn the ribs down to the bolster, and I want you to slide your elbow in so that it's holding you up, okay? Now, if this is not enough hold up, you can put your blankets under your elbow too, right? That might be better. So I'm going to bring my leg back on that block, and I'm going to take a little bit of care of turning my ribs a little to the left, because the more I turn this way, the more grippy I get in my neck, okay? So I'm better off here. I'm going to reach to my right ankle and try to hold that ankle and stretch my front of my right thigh back. Let's say this is really borderline option for you. Take a belt, get up a little higher, and then put the belt around the top of your right foot. And then if my belt is on my foot, now I'm going to try to reach that leg back. And I'm going to turn down with my neck so that I'm not tightening into my head. I'm not tightening into my neck. And again, the double blankets might be better for some of you under your elbow. So give it a few moments. I'm aware that the front of the thigh is not the loosest muscle in the body. It's like, it's fairly guarded shield for us to walk around going forward, isn't it? Okay, now we're going to get out of it So I want you to take your knees together. So you got a leg bundle. This is your leg bundle. Bundle up the legs, okay? Push into your bolster and then sit up on it and turn to face forward. So you're maybe facing the other direction for a moment. And you're going to take both of your legs. Think about these two thighs as they obviously have a little bit of a multiple action here. So as we get our belt, we're going to reach it under our feet. It's super simple. This is called Paschimottanasana, forward bend. It's a complicated way of saying forward bend, but we'll honor the history of these poses too. Okay, where they're from. When I have my legs really closely bound, I don't necessarily find this is the best for all approaches to stretching the back of the leg. So feel the spacing of your feet that works for you. Maybe it's a little bit apart, maybe they're tucked in together, and then start to pursue that forward motion. So you're going to reach your ribs forward, walk your hands on that belt so that as you pull back with your hands, your feet, right, have to flex. They have to be upright with the toes. And then when you lean forward, you can either stay with the belt at the feet. If you find that is unpleasant and is too much, you can also pass on using the belt. Take a block, probably two, and you have two hands, so two blocks are good. And put those beside your legs and lean forward, keeping the feet pushing. We're going to stay on this for about a minute, so we're going to time us. Those of you that like the belt and the blocks, take your belt around your waist. Gotta get a bigger belt here. Buckle up so it's from your feet around the back of your pelvis. I think you heard that one. And back of the pelvis pretty low, right? Back to that eyebrows of the buttocks explanation. So now as I lean forward, I can kind of tighten this down big time. And it doesn't need to get more intensified, but it keeps that proper coordination of the muscles firing in the back of the legs, right? As long as there's not too many firecrackers around them. So push into your feet. I know some of you are kind of wondering, should I get my block? Should I use my belt? Or should I just hold my belt with my hands and call it a good forward bend? It's up to you. But isn't it different than when you're doing any other kinds of forward bend patterns? Standing forward bend, it's different for the blood pressure. That one, it really lowers it. This one, interestingly enough, it doesn't cool the body as much as that pose. So this should be a little more warming. So take another experience of leaning down. If you're fairly mobile and hydrated in these joints, keep going. You could take your block a little forward, keep going, keep going. It's not a contest to get the most flexibility in your moment, but if you naturally have that ability to strive for it, take it. It's probably rare that you really push that range of motion. And if it's shaky, then that's a message to back off. So another about 20 seconds. Get the timing right, flex your feet. Okay, you might offer going from blocks to the belt again. And then when you're trying to sit up tall, you're going to come up to spine up from the back of the pelvis. I'm going to keep my belt on and bring my arms up. After all, I actually like this belt position, okay? It's really a prim and proper way to do this pose, isn't it? Take a block, place it between your hands, wide, and then bring your arms back and bend your elbows when they go into that contour. Try to keep the legs as if they're pushing down to the earth, not trying to bend and lift up the knees. They might bend anyway, but we're not going to boat pose, in other words. So elbows squeeze in towards the sides of your head, creating an helmet. Elbow helmet. Bring your arms up and go slow so you can kind of strum the tricep, and bend your elbows one more time. Okay, try to strum the tricep and lift them back up, or the block. Put the block off to the side, and then as you take the belt off or unbuckle it, I want you to get a feel here of the legs. So bring your feet together, your knees point out where you've been many times in practice, and tilt forward, hands onto your hips. See if you can lean forward so that the back of the pelvis actually is an extension versus rounding, right? So you're not rounding the back here, you're in spine extension. Yeah, and some of the poses pleasant, some not the same that you digest, right? So just feel the differences. And then as you come back up, we'll bring the knees to point up. We're going to walk our feet forward and then guide your seat down next to the bolster and turn to your right hip. And you're going to take that side sage pose with the right leg closest to the bolster. I mean, they're both close, but we're tilted on our right elbow. So you have a block or a ball on the inside of the left leg, and take a block overhead and then add your position. Okay, so you're in that right side circulation. Add a position for your head. It's like it's almost as if one of these shapes has several different positions for each part, right, that are putting it together, okay, to make the composition work. So it is kind of like playing an instrument, right, your body. So you might find, oh, I'm following Nicole, what she thinks we ought to do, but maybe you end up changing the layers a little bit, which is great. So for me on this side, I'm turning a little more towards this, to look towards the screen than I was on the other side. And so that's going to change the manipulation of my tissues and the hydration in my shoulder. So feel where your sand is going to be given the most kind of receptivity internally. If something's bugging you with that left leg and you don't like having the leg trying to stretch back, don't do it, right? You can have your legs in more of a bundle, stacking up the legs. That's great. I want you to emphasize your side. So the intercostals, the inhalation, and the weight of your head resting on the blankets. Where could that block be overhead? Now we'll be here for a short bit, and as you relate to your alternating breaths, focus on the elasticity of the ribs and the lungs, especially the coordination of your back lungs, which is where nearly 70% of them are living and housed in your body. They inhabit into the back, right? So feel how this reach of the arm supports. And simply breathe slow. Now, if you have noticed, if your knees are kind of in a bundle, sometimes this can be interesting on your hip flexor as well. It doesn't necessarily let it relax for all of us. So part of it's the nervous system being kind of, fried or wired. You know, that's another issue, right, with our circulation in the joint. So there's a lot of factors that come into letting go. Once we get into practice, you notice those things. So I want us to get that quad stretch on the second side. Again, your support here would be to move your sand. And once you reach to that left foot, you might decide to have your elbow on your blanket. See, there's different ways of coming into this. I could start pretty low, okay? You can get your belt around your foot and hold on and stretch back. Now, if this is difficult and you need to be a little lower with your upper body, you can reach your head down to your arm and just work the best that you can to get this front of the left thigh to open. Remember, this is pretty guarded shield, the quadricep. It's very possible that you might be holding your foot. So if there's a few of us with that hold of the foot, feel if you can hold on closer to your ankle so that you're not causing any potential problems with the ankle by pulling on your toes to get in the pose. Toes in pose. Okay. Now this quadricep thing is pretty interesting because that's where we're leading this towards. So I want you to let go of your foot, ankle, meaning ankle, stretch that left thigh back, and then we're going to rotate our ribs down and come up, and then take this bolster forward, unroll your props around a little bit, take your blanket off to the side, and I want you to bring your back to support on the floor and your head on one blanket and the bolster under your feet. So it's kind of a big switcheroo, isn't it? Now, this makes more sense. I don't necessarily make a lot of sense in each session, but I'm trying to get a little more sensible with our body directions, with our muscles. Okay, in time we learn. Now, when you lift up your hips here, push down to your feet to lift up your hips. Feel one or two of these lift and lowers. And then you're going to add a block or a ball between the knees is a good spot, right? Noticing the ball is a little lighter, so some people might prefer that if you have one. But when you lift with something between the knees, the likelihood of you stretching your quadricep is greater than if you don't have that between your knees, because it tends to tighten into we don't want to tighten this area more. Okay, so instead of us getting too active with the choreography yet, get a feel of your feet on your bolster. Are they supported, or are they kind of sideways? Make sure that your bolster is close enough to you so when you push down, you can get a balanced lift. You want to get the hips high, and that's why we're using the bolster, so that we can get more circulation through the spine, higher up in the spinal column. Now bring your arms overhead if you haven't already started that. You've got a block back there, I hope. Put that over to the side, you'll be using it soon. And then lower down the spine. And continue this for a few moments. And as you reach your hips up, can you work on the balance all the way into the upper back and the throat and the neck? The blanket is always an option under your head for bridge poses. So if you decide that that's too much or you need to slide it a little farther back, that's fine. Okay? So with a final few moments here, feel the movement of the arms over and reaching just enough, just the right intensity. Yeah, let go of what you are thinking, how intense you should make this. Home practice, finding just simply attending and doing however you are moving your body around the forces that you use. Just be gradual and your body might relax a little bit more. Okay, now next time you lower down, you're going to get the block. Let's say you have a ball. I want you to use a block for this next one. You're going to place the block under the back of your pelvis, and I'm going to turn the block up to the second height. So that's going to be this height, right? Second height. You're going to turn it from flat to up. And then when I'm here, I'm going to let the blanket be under my head. It's up to you. If that feels too much, you can always slide it away. Elbows are open into cactus. And get a feel here when you stretch the left leg downwards. So you're lengthening the front of the thigh. And then can you stretch the right leg down or change sides? So you have one leg straightening down. If it's a little much with both legs, you can alternate. Okay, but get that feel of the waist opening in the front. Yeah, and the guarding of the legs is to try to keep that internalizing shape of the thigh muscles closing in. That doesn't mean the legs are right side by side, but there's more internal rotation. Okay, breathing now, where breath is focusing on the abdomen and that lower core, right? The low belly gets a little bit of circulation in the shape. Now, as you are inverting the body, you're going to slide the feet and step them back up on top of the bolster. Bring a leg up at a time, straight to the sky, and take the legs up with a little forward motion, right? So it's not that I'm trying to bring my legs back to my chest, but they are lifting up. And if the block height is too much for you, you can always carefully put your feet on the bolster, then hand on the block and turn it to the lower height. You won't want to adjust that right here when you're in midair. And notice that the block's purpose is not only to help you practice inversion, but also it stretches your lower back. You can kind of feel that. And I always find that to be, I guess my idea in the beginning of doing practice was stretching my back was going forward and down. But really what's helpful when you're, well, we're all aging, is to practice back bends, right? And to practice helping encourage that spacing in the vertebral column so it less compression between the discs. So this is actually, it's an arch in the back, but it is stretching those tissues up, right, to the tailbone. So if you notice that's okay, it doesn't cause any friction, good to get the legs up with something under the back, whether it's towels, blanket, block. We're going to do this one twice today, so we're stimulating our immune system. Intensify the flush of the lymph nodes. Let the feet have a little separation, doesn't have to be big, but a little bit of separation. And then circle the feet. They're probably kind of chilly, right? Since you're inverting the body. That blood flow moves to the vital organs. Go both directions with the toes. No direction with your nose, but just to breathe. Good. And then feeling when the knees bend. And then a foot at a time lowers down. And pushing down to feet. But that puts a little bit of pressure into my shoulder blades too. So when you lift up your hips, just a tad more, you're going to slide the block away. And as we lower the spine down, ease the back muscles thoroughly. We'll take the right leg, cross it over the left, and we'll bring the knees to the right. So the block might be essential under your right leg, or the ball works really good for these too. But it's a cross layer, it's a counter twist for that left IT band. So if it's any of these crossovers are a bit stiff around the knees, you can always modify it and make a variation that's just not as grouped around wrapping the leg, right? So get a feel here, and if it still isn't fine that that's okay for your knees, there is another option we're coming into next. I'm giving us about 4 poses linked together. So you get the challenging, the elementary variations as well. Now bring your knees so that they are centered, the left foot on the bolster. Bring the right leg to cross the ankle to the left knee. And then can you put your hands down besides your hips so that we properly kind of execute this one. Many of us will grip in our back to get our knee to our chest. So I want you to put your hands to widen your palms, and then try to get your back muscles to lengthen so your stomach has to do a contraction, like a sit-up type of position. My head stays back, and then I scoop around my lower back to tuck and bring the knees towards my chest. So try to do this action, repeat the attempt, and then get a feel like, oh, I can do that without gripping my back. And then hold the back of your left leg or below the left knee, either one. One will be preferred with a knee. You know, you'll either want to hold under your knee or just not touch that space. So as you squeeze the legs towards you, if it's comfy on your back, don't mess with it. Just notice where it's good. Notice what's good. Find something good. And rock side to side. Feel the back of the pelvis. Now the right hip is a little bit more clear in your experience right now. Okay, so we're going to lower the left foot back down, let go. And now we're going to take the full hip crossover. So the right leg is back over the left leg. Same thing, but we're going left. So I'm going to have us do this with the bolster under our feet today. So I'm going to have it, you put that block on the left side and then slide the left foot over to the right side of the bolster and then bring the knees over towards the block. This is a big wrap around the leg pattern. So if this is too much, I'll give you 2 pose options. You can add your sand right now to the outer right hip. If you're not comfortable with this one at all, you're going to take the left leg to rest on the bolster and take a belt under your right foot and stretch the right leg over to the left. Okay, so that's an option if you don't want to wrap the legs, and it's a good one. So this feels a little more streamlined for me in my hip. I like it. But crossing the leg is good too. So you decide, and having the belt on in your foot doesn't mean that you aren't eligible to use your sand. You know, you can still get your sand onto that exterior right thigh. It's just a little bit kind of wonky when you have a belt added. It's a challenge. The reason why that's challenging is the idea with the sand is that your muscles are going to ease into the position. When you have a belt under your foot, it's continuing to fire through the hip. It's like it just keeps putting out, right, a little bit of a spark. So you'll notice if you don't have the belt and you just have the leg wrapped and you put your sand on, it's a different sparks in the hip, still a hip stretch. So you decide, and maybe you learn something new with that experience. Yeah, it's nice to learn something new with these practices after so many years. Now the arms are in a very casual space. They're open. If you have the belt, that's a little different. You're holding with the left hand. And a few more moments. Keep that hip awake. Everything else can take a doze. Okay, now as we bring the sand aside and we take the legs to windshield wiper, uncross, remove the belt if you're using, and then as you bring your feet on the bolster, as wide as the bolster, swish the knees side to side, windshield wiper the legs, and then get to feel the weight on your buttocks and the leaning of the legs side to side. It feels pretty nice on the back complex as well as the hip and the legs. It's amazing how comfy windshield wiper can be. Okay, now as I bring the left leg up, kick it up, cross it over that right leg, knees to the left. Now this is going to feel like you just did some of this, right? Because you recently were stretching through that hip when the leg was in the crossover. Now we're in the counter twist for the second side. So it'll all come together. You'll have a really nice experience in the hips today with this work. So if you find that you don't want to use sand on this one, not on a counter twist, and it's not a long pose because it's so strict on the IT band. So you really are getting that nice soak there. So not using sand, you can always touch to the exterior hip and kind of massage that area. You're jostling the tissues, just getting that blood flow into that space. You can use your ball and massage into the hip. Even just a little bit of a pressure, and then use that to massage down and across the fascial plane. Okay. Enough fascial planing. Fascial skimming would be what it might be called. Feels kind of good. Okay, get with the program here. Bring the knees back center and left leg lifts gently, stays connected to the right leg, left foot to the right knee. And then here's the challenge, right? Spine down, knees, spine long, knees in. Okay, so give it a couple tries. You can do this for some core conditioning, lifting and lowering the right foot and trying to push into your center. Hug the leg on that right side in, hold either under the knee or behind the right leg, and experience now into this left hip. Yeah, because now we're going to that second side. So as you feature motion, especially when we change up these sequences often enough that it can keep you returning to practice and finding that you return into your body, turn things around. Notice the left foot, even look to the leg, how it's curved around the ankle. And then if that left foot flexes, the difference in your hip joint might feel like a better stretch that way. But it's simply experience through that left hip. Breathing slow. Exhale completely. Okay, now from the subtle here, we go into a little wider branch as the hands slide away from holding the leg. The right foot comes down to the bolster. And then I take the left leg over, and as I cross it over and move my knees over to that right side, I'm going to put a block under my legs on that right side and then add a sandbag to the left hip. Okay? If you decide to go with the belt and take away the crossover layer, that's fine. It might be better for some people's knees. Okay? So it just depends on that knee history, and not necessarily is it going to harm your knee if you do it either, right? We're just all connected a little differently and have different histories in the joints. So noticing if you sense it's right, if it feels too complex and sore, then don't practice this type of crossing. So I'll give you the modification. Those of you with the sand and the hip crossover, stay here, arms relaxed, head turns left, eyes relax in. And those that are using the belt, bring the knees back up center, uncross the left foot, then relax the right hip or the right knee open on the bolster as the left leg crosses over to the right. And it crosses over and downstream. This is a good one. This is a really good pose. Right, so we're in that crossover hip dynamic. And if this feels like the option that's best suited for your body and it's intense and you want to try to stay with that, your mind might focus better when the poses are more intense. You can stay in the moment if you're intense or not. Now that has an underlined part of the word that has tense, so that I don't suppose that you want to be considered that, huh? Oh, it is what it is. Okay, so get a feel here where that kind of the slab of the outer leg, right, is a little bit in its grippy mode. Just think this is the center of gravity in your life. It is the center of you. So it's going to have the issues of the upper and lower worlds. It's just going to have that. So I think of hips as closets of the body. It does feel good when you work through them, even if it's a partial release. It's worth your time. It's good for your back muscles, right? It's good for the pelvic floor. There's so many different places that it helps. Now, as you soften up your pose here, however you happen to be, some of you with belts, some without, we're going to actually make our way up. So I want you to bring your knees into your chest, circle, and you're creating that rotation through the back of the pelvis and the sacrum. Go both directions, circling the knees, circling the sacrum. It's pretty much just knees to chest. Okay. And then carefully roll to a side and let your hands help push you up. Okay. Now we're going to come to kneel on our blanket. Okay. And I want you to take a position so that your blanket is centering on your mat. Okay. As best as it can. Now this flat blanket sometimes is better for some than this quarter fold. So it's really up to you. I'm so used to doing the quarter fold. I haven't quite adapted to the flat yet. And then it kind of cushions all the way up into my hip. So I think I just have adapted to that elementary version for so long. But you can always change it. I want you to turn your bolster so it's vertical in front of you. So you're going to be able to support your core on that. And then when you do lower down on your bolster, feel like kind of like a plank pose, like an upright push-up. You don't have to hold it for eternity, but just give it a try. You got a bolster to fall on if you need to fall down. It's right there. So when I lower down my knees on my blanket, I've got to get the blanket farther back. Perfect. And then I stretch my torso forward with my arm energy holding me up. Okay, now once you do attempt to go down onto your bolster, you're probably not going to be as excited to get back up. So before you lower your chest down, hook your toes under once more time. And then get a feel, can you lift up your knees and come back to that plank pose? That upright push-up. That doesn't sound as friendly as plank, I guess. Okay. Now when you lower your knees, you're going to let the toes relax. Lower your waist onto the bolster and then bring your elbows down and lengthen the torso forward in Sphinx pose. Try to let your elbows be fairly heavy and also relax your rear. So you're not trying to grip your buttocks to be in this position. So that the summary of the experience is that the back is strengthening, but not trying to get tighter in the middle back. So what might help us here is to slide the hands back so they feel as if you lift your thumbs are near your shoulder line, that height. Now I want you to bring your elbows out like you kind of are. It's kind of like I think of this as grasshopper when I have my hands in this type of position. So when my feet relax, I bring my elbows wide to span my back. Now chin to chest, and then fingers open, hands wide, but keep them under the shoulder line, and then push to come up to that upward facing dog pose. Lengthen through the front line of the body. Breathe. And then as you let the toes hook under, you're going to move back to table, toes under, round your back to cat pose, chin to chest. And inhale, arching. Exhale, rounding, chin to chest. Inhale, arching through the spine. As you exhale, rounding through the back. Okay, last time as you arch on through the spine, let's hook the toes to lift up the knees and stretch back to downward facing dog, so a little more intense into the legs. Now, if the hands are kind of splayed out and you feel like you're spread too thin in the pose, you could walk your feet in closer or your hands farther back, but I want you to have a pretty long dog pose so that you are working the elements of strength and kind of inclusivity in your core body, like your arm core, your ribs, your back muscles. So the feet could be a little bit wider, right? You might take the stance farther out, depending on your needs. And then we're going to walk our legs so that they step together and the left foot steps to the top left corner, like towards your left hand, outwards. And then lower the right knee down. Get your blocks into the sides. I forgot to mention have your blocks for this. To the sides of your bolster. And then position your right thigh so it stretches down. If you can or want to put your elbows down on your blocks, you're welcome to. Again, this is one of those factors where if I go down towards the floor, then I got to get back up. So you might decide to stay up and work with this position, but if it hurts your wrists, it's not worth it, right? So you might decide, okay, I'm going to get back on down to my elbows, get a deeper stretch in my quadricep. My left knee is pointing out, so the inner thigh is stretching. Yeah, I bet you can feel this through. You do what you can. If you need to pause, take a different pose, that's okay. These are all temporary. We'll go in and out of different cycles. Okay, switching. So we're going to come back and I want you to switch the leg side. So that's all. Just left knee back to the right knee. Step the right foot up to the top corner. Sense the left thigh lengthening. Now, if there's a chance that you don't want to be down onto the knee, but you still want to stretch your quadricep, you can do this kind of work, right, in a standing upper fashion with your knee off the blanket as well. Just a simple lunge. So those are good options. But really work with the thigh tissue versus stretching and straining your belly tissue. Try to get your legs to do the awareness work. Feeling the back thigh, feeling the right foot, the inner right thigh, elbows down or up. Breathing. It only helps. Okay, now we'll come together in a little more of a unified wide stance. So we're gonna lift up the back knee. Actually, let's take a little care here for a moment with this bolster. Turn your bolster so it's across your mat versus straight in front of you. And then bring your blocks into your right foot. You're gonna lift up the back knee and turn to your left so you're in a wide stance, okay? So it's a little simpler than we just were, and it will keep getting that way. So we're gonna have a wide stance with the feet, and if you like to come up right, you know, and have your hands on your hips and go back forward so you're working with that quality of inversion, you're welcome to, but you might find being here and not straining the back to come up and down is helpful. So I have my feet, so there's a little bit more of a turning in pivot through the leg muscles. And then I try to get my hands farther forward on the block heights, they're mid height. And as I lower down the chest, my head is between the arms and the hips reach back. Okay. Really feel the connectivity of the bottoms of your feet, right? So notice the reach from your heel bone, right? That spans out to the side, the bottom of each foot up into the toes. Yeah, this pose, it's almost as if you don't feel toes as much as you feel the heels, kind of like hooves, right? This pose, this could be called hoofasana. So when I feel the heels kind of dig down, the back of my knees get a lot of awareness to them. So take the pose where your blocks can be a little closer towards your mat. And then you activate your midsection and also the arms a little bit more. So if I pull my blocks in, they're underneath my chest, and I'm going to move my chest a little forward so I can balance some weight onto my hands. Now, we're not going to do an arm balance. We're not going to try to lift our feet to the ceiling or anything like that. But I want you to bend your knees so you go one side to the other side, just do a little bit of leaning to stretch and really support the strength around your knees. But again, once you move into that angle and it feels a little awkward, you want to keep the knee pointing forward though. We're not trying to jut the knee out to the side. We're keeping it forward. Take a couple more rounds each side, bending and leaning. There you go. Good. So you can feel the motion through the leg, kind of the leg spire all the way up into the seat. Leg spire. When the legs expire, then you'll move along. Okay, taking the one more inversion. Remember, this is about head below heart, right? Cardiovascular pose. So this one, you're going to bend your knees and hold the outsides of the legs and let your head lower down. If you happen to touch a prop, like, oh, the bolster's in the way, then scoot a little bit to the side so that you can use your bolster under the crown of your head. If you're far away from that, you're higher up, then you don't have to worry about that issue. So it goes both ways, doesn't it? Give it a few moments. The key is head below the heart. Kind of revive the skin cells of the face. It's a good facial toning pose. Now, if your elbows are farther out, I want you to bring everything back to center and take the body weight forward on the roots of the toes. Take a block under each hand and then start to move to your right leg. That's kind of our forward. As we spin the right foot back forward, we're going to stay upright, the back heel reaching behind you. So you're stretching through your left calf behind you and center down through that back heel. I'll give you just a little pointed awareness where we're traveling with this. We're going to be doing a little bit of the standing basic work, not on our knees, but upright standing patterns. And then we'll progress to the wall or the couch, anything to get the legs up. So really get the feel here when you're on your blocks, that your blocks are high enough right now You know, even if you're fairly flexible and you can touch the floor, I want you to start to maneuver your ability to balance, okay? So the back foot is going to turn out, right? And my right knee is going to bend just above the ankle. Nothing too arduous in the knee. But we're going to try to get a left hand back on a left hip, door one. Maybe you're going to bend that right knee enough you can get your right hand on your right hip and then come up towards warrior one. So warrior one would be first. I have the lunge, my legs are stable, and then I can stretch the arms up. Okay, keep it simple. Now keep in mind you could have your hands on your hips, keep this lunge pattern, but this back thigh is turned out to open up the hip. Arms reaching would be useful. Yeah. Hands on hips is fine. Breathe. Okay, see if you can keep the orientation of the core moving forward and then lower down, hands to blocks. Step the back foot so the heel turns to lift up. Step the left foot to the right foot to the front and take your blocks so they're on the sides and they're wide enough to the side that you can take a little bit of a forward bend. Now, if this is uncomfortable for you with blood pressure, I don't want you to try to bring your head down. So those of you that find that's not working for you right now, some of you are all the way into a forward bend and can take that and hold the back of the legs or the elbows. And the rest of us are going to take a block between the knees. So this is helpful for the blood pressure. It's a little bit more of a modulator. The block is between the knees, and you can take this one anyway, and bring your arms forward of your shoulders and stay with this. Not to try to bring it any higher volume, but controlling into the pelvic floor. So this is good anyway, right? Even if you could do that forward fold, you've done a lot of them already today. Maybe you want to do something a little bit more in that control of the pelvic floor. If you can't control anything else, try to control yourself. Okay, feel where the hips are reaching back behind you. Those of you in forward bend, your hips are reaching to the sky. And then we're going to go forward and down and remove the block and place it besides the foot. And then take that right leg to step back. So we're on that final second side. But get a feel here where your blocks are underneath you and pivot the back foot out so the left knee moves forwards just above the ankle. And then as you start to move the right hand to the hip, the left hand to the hip, and then you come up and you create that reach of the ribs. And maybe your arms can come up and extend. Feel the back heel pressing. Feel the energy from that right sitting bone to the heel bone. And breathing. Yeah. Okay, now if I start to move my arms in front of my chest, I'm going to bring my hands on down. And then as I tip down to that left knee bending, pivot the back right heel up, and then take a step forward. Step into the feet, widen the foot stance out a little wider than hips distance apart for all of us here. And then bring your arms forward of your shoulders and come up. Hands push out to the sides. Bring the shoulders back. Roll them back. And now we're going to readjust our whole kind of floor plan. So what you're going to do is find a place you can get your legs up. And I want to be a good 3 to 5 minute upside downish here. This is a real safe one. If you've got the blood pressure issues, it's a lot safer than if you're doing forward bend, dropping down. So we're going to do a legs up pose. So what you'll need is a bolster, or you're going to put your feet up on the chair or on a couch, right? So this is going to be that. So we have a blanket. Hi, Mindy. How'd you get in here? Did you get a new arm? How'd you open that door? How she opened the door. Okay, so I want you to take it so that you're sitting on the edge where you're going to put your legs up. And your seat, she thinks class is just starting. Okay. You're going to place your seat to the wall, and I want you to roll to get your legs up. Okay? Mindy, you got to move over a little bit because people can't see. Okay? You can take a seat. So scoot your seat all the way up to the wall and then slide the blanket underneath your head. If you happen to have a sandbag, I want you to also grab a hold of that. Now, if you're using a couch or a chair, it's a little simpler. You put your legs so they're up on to that couch or chair, and you have that bend in the knees, and then that hook right onto that couch or chair lets the lower back sink. So if you have a bag of weight, you can still put that on your shins or your rib cage. Okay, so apply the weight of your sand now to feet or to the rib cage. Okay, bring your arms so that they are actually touching to the ribs, the bucket of the ribs. Should I show this on you, Mindy? Your rib bucket? Okay. And then as you have that bucket of the rib cage, you're trying to get that to actually go laterally open. So this height under the hips, if you're on a chair or a couch, you still want to put something under the back of your pelvis, like a blanket or a little pillow is good too. That's the width of your sacrum. Those work really nicely. And then where you feel the weight of your hips onto the bolster or the pillow, let your arms release straight back. Assign the awareness in the back of the brain to relax the brain stem and return the breath to the inhalation station. The belly fills, the diaphragm descends. In some ways in your mind it descends, right? But it is actually ascending when you're upside down, when your legs are up. When you're standing, it descends. And then as you exhale, it returns back towards the heart. So collective focus on simply the breathing. Inhale, belly expands, diaphragm ascends, right? It pushes the abdominal contents, and then as you exhale those contents, the weight pushes down and then makes the exhalation longer. Anchor your attention on the breathing and be willing to connect to the collective of those that are sharing in this practice, just that awareness that connects us to others. Breathing in wellness from practice, reconnecting with its true nature. Now, after the moments here of the legs inverting, reversing that circulation back to the heart and to the brain. If your legs have sand at the base, you're going to want to move your feet away from the wall, or if you have the legs curled over a cushion, you're going to slide the sand off. However that way of movement is for you, move any weight off, and then bring the feet together, the knees out. So either cushion or wall works fine for this. And you don't have to push on the legs. You can just see how they absorb this reversal, and the tailbone is trying to press down. And that creates that activation of the spinal column. But you anticipate spinal extension here. Anticipating wellness. Okay. All right, tailbone is pressing and knees come in towards the chest. Give a nice pull of your back muscles by drawing your knees in. And we'll simply roll to the side. I don't know where your path is in your direction when you roll, but see if you can come up and then establish a temporary seat so that I can connect to sending, or we can all send wellness to each other in this moment. Kind of a new experiment maybe for you in your life, doing these types of things. But when you have the hands onto the lap or your hands are reaching in unity, palm to palm, prayer position, noticing what that connection is with the soles of the hands pressing together. There's a natural heat generated. And as the brain rests down to the heart center, surrender there. And then pull in the forces of breath from inside. And with an exhalation, bowing into the space behind your heart. In gratitude, namaste. Thank you. I appreciate you all coming to this session. Something to look forward to.